Guys from Yonkers Voice, thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. Today we have New York State Senator Shelley Mayer.
Mayor, right?
Oh boy, I got it. Did I tell you that I'm going to night school for my accent because it's a little thick?
I like your accent.
You like my accent?
Sí, porque hablas español.
I'm dropping off.
Okay.
That's it. The senator likes it, I'm dropping off. Senator, we're here because we have important issues that affect not just our city, but the entire county and state.
Absolutely.
Yonkers education is an important thing. I know that it's more complex than meets the eye, the formula, how we get money. And tons of us here in Yonkers, including myself, we don't understand how this formula works.
I don't blame you.
Okay.
It's complicated.
It's complicated. It's like a relationship. It's complicated.
Exactly.
Okay?
No, it is.
We also have other issues. Bail reform.
Yes.
Okay? I think is one of the most concerning subjects today.
Yes, look forward
And
to talking
education.
about it.
So let's start. Where do you want to start? Bail reform or education?
Well, let's start on education
Okay.
because I'm the chair of the Senate Education Committee, which means that until the budget is done at the end of March, our job is to fight for the full funding of the foundation aid formula. Now in Yonkers, always people say, well, the formula doesn't treat Yonkers fairly, and that is true. It doesn't treat a lot of places fairly. It uses measurements that are not current. It uses factors that no longer are weighed appropriately. So the formula is a section of law that was created in 2007 in response to the CFE lawsuit that required the state to provide a sound basic education to every child, and it was intended to give more state money to districts in greater need. So theoretically, Yonkers should get more. And in fact, Yonkers does get more than some districts, but it doesn't get as much as it needs. And it doesn't get as much compared to some other districts as it should. And that's largely because the property wealth in Yonkers, not the student population, but the wealth of housing is high. So my house might be worth $500,000 here and $25,000 in Buffalo. So the formula anticipates that the locality, through property taxes, is taking a bigger share of the cost of education. In fact, Yonkers is taking about 50% of the share. But every year we have to fight for more money because Yonkers has some institutional shortcomings, shortfalls on the education budget side. This year about $46 million. If they just go through with the current budget into next year, the Yonkers Public Schools will be $46 million short. And that's unacceptable. So right now we are fighting to get money to fill that hole and also to, over time, improve the way Yonkers and other districts are paid, because many districts are having challenges. And yes, I represent Yonkers, I live here and I care the most about Yonkers, but I also represent New Rochelle and White Plains and Portchester, and I care about Ossining and Peekskill and East Ramapo and districts throughout the state as the chair of the whole state's education committee that are not being treated fairly.
Well, Senator, I understand, and I'm sure that you don't just love all those cities and the state and United States as well.
But Yonkers number one.
But we are focusing in Yonkers, and
Yes.
I'm going to let another guy from another social platform to address those other cities.
Okay.
It's complex, as you're just trying to explain, and probably it went right over my head, and as it goes right over a lot of people's heads, okay? Because we really don't care much about this complexity. We care about solutions. And I don't want to point off, I could tell you, but Senator, did that conclusion just arrive? Or did everyone before you knew about this formula?
Everyone, it has been there since 2007.
Okay.
I first got elected to the Assembly in 2012 in a special election. And since the time I was there, I've been involved with my colleagues, I don't take all the credit, in pushing money towards Yonkers and in trying to fix this formula. For example, in 2007, the Raceway was required to make an additional payment just for the Yonkers schools. We'd like to increase that amount. That is, every time you open this complicated formula, there are losers. and there are winners. And we want Yonkers to be a winner, but there's a reluctance on the state's part to, and that means the executive, the governor's office, to open it because there'll be winners and losers. But we are committed to doing so. I held roundtables around the state to try to create pressure to change it and to improve it and to address cities like Yonkers.
And what is the holdup from the state, from the state,
Well,
from Albany?
first place, let's put it in context. Every year, Yonkers got about $300 million in state funding last year for the schools. So it's not like we're talking about peanuts. The state is paying a lot of money towards Yonkers schools. So that $300 million included additional money to avoid a catastrophe. Every year, we've been able to put more money in to avoid a layoff or reduction in services. You remember the $45 million accounting error
Yes.
that Yonkers had? I was there that year. We had to find the money.
Did you ever found the money?
We found enough state money so we avoided layoffs.
But did we found where that missing money went?
No, that wasn't my part. My part was to keep the schools going so that parents and students didn't face layoffs and reduction, and we did. So I understand there's resentment that the state hasn't fixed it. But while that's going on, my colleagues and I, together with the governor's office, have been fighting to avoid a crisis every year. Yonkers has a structural problem. It's not just the formula. People should face up to this, a structural shortcoming.
Are you talking about management?
No, I'm talking about finances.
Finances.
So, no, not management. So right now Yonkers, and credit to Mayor Spano, over time he's, and the city council have increased the percentage that Yonkers pays of its city money towards the schools. But over time, we need new sources of revenue in Yonkers to help sustain schools. Whether it's new development, whether it's MGM, which I hope it is.
We all hope, yeah.
Yes, but that would be a source of revenue. We can't have a structural shortfall every year, not $3 million, $46 million. That we have to fix. We have some responsibility to fix that here. Not entirely on the state. The state has to do its part, but also we have a structural shortcoming that we can't get to a close to break-even budget. And we have to fix that.
Now, Senator, are you and all your colleagues in line with changing the budget, or there is some conflicts within your group?
The four of us that represent Yonkers, the majority leader, myself, Nader Sage, and Assemblyman Pretlow, we're all practical. Our job is to find money to avoid a problem. And that's what we're doing right now. So Yonkers has this shortfall. Our job in the next 5 weeks is to work with the governor's office, to work with our leaders in the legislature in both houses, our colleagues who have to vote for it, because they want money for their districts. They got to decide that Yonkers is worth putting a lot of extra money in. We have to do all that to get to the point by March 31st that we give Yonkers enough money to avoid a problem.
Now, Senator, is there anything that the people of Yonkers could do to help this formula being changed, or so that Albany can see this differently? Is there anything that we as people can do?
Instead of thinking about the formula being different, this year the focus is on fully funding the formula so that we could get up to closer to what districts are owed. And yes, there's a statewide effort to push the executive, governor and his folks, to fully fund the foundation aid formula. In order to do so, we need revenue. And I am for full gaming at Yonkers and at Aqueduct. If that could start this year, we could begin to get more money into the coffers to get it out to schools and to help Yonkers.
We asked Mayor Spano that same question, and he's also all for
Yes.
full gaming.
We're on the same page.
On the same page.
But let me point out, if we got it this year, there will be additional money in the budget for education. And we need the governor to agree that he could go above his spending cap. He's had a self-imposed spending cap of 2% every year. State money can't go up more than 2%. We need it to go up more than 2% so that we can fully fund our schools. So we need the money, and we need to go above the spending cap without taxes.
Now, since we talk about money, finances, what about the state budget? How is that going?
Well, this is the state budget.
Well, this is the education.
That's the
education
biggest
part.
share of the state budget, the biggest share by far. The other problem is health care. So there's a $2 billion shortfall. $2 billion.
It's a lot of money.
In Medicaid. Yes, it's a huge amount of money. And the governor created a group that is going to decide how to cut $2 billion. I'm very worried about that because they're going to come up with recommendations, and it could be cutting the rates at St. John's and St. Joseph's, at our nursing homes, at our home care. As they say, there's no Medicaid nurse. The nurse serves you on Medicaid and you on commercial insurance and you on no insurance. The people serve everybody. So I'm very concerned about the $2 billion cut that the Medicaid redesign team, which is what the governor called it, is going to come up with their proposal to cut $2 billion, and we're not going to know what it looks like until very close to the end of the budget period.
Let's move into bail reform, Senator.
Yes.
Bail reform, social justice or injustice, it's a hot topic in our society nowadays, and it's affecting Yonkers drastically. Before we go into it, let me tell you that Commissioner John Mueller sent us a message saying that he thanks you for being open-minded, listening to the law enforcement in order to tweak this,
Yes.
to make it right. I can understand the theory behind bail reform.
You can.
I can.
Sure.
I can understand the theory, but I cannot understand when it's put in practice. I cannot understand why somebody who probably stole a loaf of bread cannot pay bail and stays in jail until trial date.
Right.
And somebody who killed somebody because he has the money and he will come out the next day because he can't post
Well,
bail.
that's what we were trying to fix.
I understand. That's what I said. I understand the theory behind it.
It wasn't just a theory, it was a reality.
Okay, it's a reality. But now we have the other thing. We have people that are being arrested and released the next day. Now, I was at your press conference,
Yes.
Cash for Guns,
Yes.
at the county state level, and I said to myself, okay, here we are with Cash for Guns program, but those kids that are using guns, that don't turn those guns in, are arrested and released the next day.
Well, it depends what they're charged with. So that was the first place.
But that's theory or practice?
That is what the law that we passed said. There are crimes for which, under the law that we passed, which was intended to address this problem, which was that having money was the decider of whether you stayed in jail, rather than other factors. So it differentiated between crimes. Misdemeanors and what are called nonviolent crimes, no bail was allowed. And violent crimes, bail was allowed. That is the current law that we passed. Now here is the
So
challenge.
what's going on then?
So here's the challenge. There are misdemeanors that you and I might think, I'm nervous about that person. I think bail should be set because I'm concerned they're going to do it again. And that's what Commissioner Mueller is worried about, and that's a fair point.
And that's what been happening, Senator.
No. Well, we don't have all the evidence. That being said, I've met with Commissioner Mueller. I've met with the president of the union that represents police officers and captains and lieutenants in Yonkers and throughout the state, and particularly in Westchester. We don't have all the evidence, but we do have legitimate concerns, which I'm very open to, and I have been very much in favor of making some changes that address these issues. For example, someone breaks in but there is no injury into your house. They're charged with a crime that is not bailable because there was not an injury. It's not deemed serious or violent. But to you or me, it's serious and violent.
When you're the victim, it's always serious and
Right. Even if they didn't hurt me, it's still serious and violent and scary, and you're nervous about that person coming back the next day. So I think that is a very legitimate point, that the differentiation of crimes doesn't match up with our experience. On paper, what is called a violent felony, there may be other crimes that we may think of as violent, but under the law they're not deemed violent. And therefore I think we should modify it. I've been very open to that from the beginning. And I don't want to back up, and we're not going to back up from the premise that we were determined to change. And change is hard. But we don't have all the evidence. That being said, we have enough anecdotal evidence to, in my opinion, to move for some changes. The leader, Andre Stewart Cousins, has been open to change. and we are working towards change. I think it will be in the budget, but I do think it's important, Ruth, that the temperature of the conversation needs to be brought down. First of all, we don't have all the evidence. We have people creating rumors and newspapers creating stories that are not always accurate. Second place, on social media, there's been a tremendous outcry about it, and some of it is frankly racist. And we got to call that out. That's not acceptable. Have a disagreement. I'm so open to people agreeing and disagreeing and saying change this, or I don't agree with your vote. Fine. But we are not going to backtrack into racist stereotypes about who committed these crimes and that you killed. I have people tell me I killed people. Tone it down.
Those are emotions. This is people speaking on emotions.
Well, that's not always legitimate. And when you have a policy, have a disagreement. We're grown-ups. You know what? I've met with Chief Mueller. He disagrees with some of the things we did, but we've had a thoughtful conversation about his ideas how to modify the law. He's given me some suggestions, as have the other chiefs. We had a very good meeting with the leader, Andre Stewart-Cousins, with the chiefs throughout Westchester. Very constructive. And we'll continue to have those meetings, and with the people on the ground, the unions that represent the members. So I'm open to change. I believe we should change it. I've made that clear from the beginning. I think there are some modifications that are necessary, and I'm hopeful that we will.
Now, Senator, was that a rush to pass this law? Because all these conversations that you are having with law enforcement and people involved, or being victims, shouldn't those conversations should have them taken place prior to passing the law?
Well, first place, let me say this. This issue has been around for years in Albany. Some of these folks didn't take it seriously that we were going to move on it. So, yes, we had conversations, for example, with district attorneys, with our district attorney, multiple conversations. He's the chief prosecutor for the county. There were conversations with police representatives in various jurisdictions, and this had been the subject of hearings and roundtables. Could there be more conversation? Yes, but there's also resistance. There's resistance to change. And yet most law enforcement agreed that change was necessary. Now, I haven't met a single, really high-level police officer who didn't think some change in bail was required.
Well, there is no doubt about that. The problem is when people are caught with a gun, just caught with the gun. They haven't done actually a crime yet. Well, they haven't used the gun to commit another crime, because carrying that illegal gun, it's a crime on its own. And if you are caught, you get arrested and released the next day.
It depends what you're charged with. That's
if you have a gun, isn't that
unlawful possession of a gun? It depends. Look, it depends. We try to segregate out violent crimes.
Having a gun, Senator, it's a violent crime, because I don't carry a gun to go to the store. I carry a gun to kill somebody if necessary, or to commit the crime.
So it depends. I'm not going to get into what the crimes are. I agree that some of the crimes should be modified. I don't disagree with you. So that's what we're working towards.
So, Senator, please look at the camera, and like I have Donna Nolan here watching, and you know that she's been a victim of violent crime.
Yes, and I've been a big supporter of hers.
You have, and I have seen you in many places with her, including that press conference. But this is not about Donna Nolan. There is thousands and millions of victims out there that are very upset with the way that this bail reform turned out to be.
It's not a fixed thing. We are very much, I don't know if people understand, the Senate Majority Conference, led by Andre Stewart-Cousins, has committed to making changes in it quickly.
What's quickly? What is quickly?
Hopefully in the budget, the next 4 weeks.
The next 4 weeks.
Yes.
So guys, hopefully change will come. This new bail reform law will be tweaked. Is that the
tweaked?
Right? Tweaked. And
discovery, which we're not talking about, which is another part of it.
But we are going to talk about
it.
If I'm a victim of a crime, I think I would feel very uncomfortable with the new discovery laws that will allow the perpetrator or the attorney to walk into my house, to interview me and look around.
Not to interview you.
Well, to talk, to watch, to look.
You don't have to speak to such a person.
I don't have to, but it's coming to
So
my
there
house.
is a provision in the law that the district attorney can move for a protective order to protect someone from that. So let's not leave that out. We built that in there. So I think the issues of timing and the issues of disclosure of information are things that may need to be modified. But don't forget, we put in there, and the district attorney, who is the prosecutor, can say, you know what, I don't want your name and address to be disclosed. You know, at the end of the day, in a trial, that all does have to be disclosed. And what was happening was that people, in order to get out of jail because of bail, were pleading to crimes that they didn't know the evidence against them because they wanted to get out of jail. That's pretty understandable. So we are trying to address that. I believe that there are provisions of the discovery law in meeting with the city of Yonkers and other municipalities that we need to modify. There are some things that were reached that I don't think make the most wise judgments. And also this issue of protective orders, which I'm telling you, the DA has the power to do, to go to the court and say, do not disclose this information. They ought to take advantage of and do it frequently and let judges make a decision. Because if it's something that not every offense is one that would trigger that, but many would. But that being said, again, we are looking at modifications.
And what is the biggest modifications that you are looking to implement?
Well, discovery has to do with the time, because the time is an issue for law enforcement. It's at 15 days for some offenses, the majority, and that requires a lot of overtime if you have cameras in other places that are discovering evidence that could be required to be produced. So it may be that it takes more time. We don't want to take an officer off the street and have them just reviewing video cameras. So we may need to lengthen the time period. That's one of the things. There are some offenses that technically were reached by that I think should not have been reached, that cause problems for municipalities like Yonkers, certain kinds of code violations and parking tickets that were really, it's not intended to reach those. We should modify that. I think the biggest thing is the time and this issue of disclosure in certain kinds of crimes, particularly domestic violence and other crimes where a witness information is relevant.
Like here in Yonkers, there have been, I think, a case, there's a few cases where people that were arrested for robbery,
Yes.
arrested, released the very same day, rearrested the very next day
Yes.
for the very same thing.
Yes, the repeater. I told you,
Repeated multiple times.
I'm very worried about the repeater, and that's why I believe that we should give judges discretion in crimes to make a decision. So what I call a repeater, which is what you're discussing, is someone who I think we should say to a judge, even if they're charged with a nonviolent crime, a judge should have the discretion. Frequently those people need drug treatment on the front end. Get them into treatment. Order them into treatment right away and get them off the street. So I am in favor of granting judges discretion in limited circumstances to allow a judge to remand, if not bail, remand to jail such a person.
Right now, there is no discretion, correct?
There is not discretion in the non-violent crimes.
So robbery, it's a non-violent crime.
No, the certain degrees are,
Of robbery.
certain degrees aren't.
Okay. Now, Senator,
So I do want your viewers to understand, we're not going to back up from the premise that money shouldn't decide whether you're in jail pending
We all agree on
conviction.
that,
And we
yes.
agree. And law enforcement agrees.
correct.
The path to getting there is never going to be an easy one. And when this issue was brought to us by others about someone out and doing it again and again and again, there's only a small number of people who are in that group, but they cause havoc and they cause fear. And we don't want people to be afraid. That's why I have, from the beginning, said let's grant some judicial discretion in some cases.
Now, in my conversation with the commissioner, police commissioner John Mueller, he spoke about precise policing. Have you heard about that?
I've heard him talk about it.
And how you feel about that, precise policing? Do you know much about it? Or?
Well, I've heard him talk about it. You know, and I have a lot of respect for Commissioner Mueller I've worked with him for many years on various things together. And I appreciate that his view is that the few moments that you as a layperson relate to a police officer really determine your relationship with the police. So if I get stopped and pulled over for going through a red light and someone is rude and aggressive instead of being professional, I'm going to think, oh, those Yonkers police, blah, blah, blah. His view is make that time, whether it's with a victim, a person charged with a crime, or someone simply just interacting, make that 20 minutes a professional, respectful time to the extent you can, obviously. Now I'm not talking about tackling somebody. And press for that relationship to be positive. This is something Commissioner Mueller is very good at. He did very well in the 4th Precinct in reestablishing a really positive relationship because he understands that people judge the police harshly and sometimes not correctly so, and that we need to change the relationship. And he's done a very good job. I'm very supportive of his efforts. He has disagreed strongly with me on this, but he and I have met multiple times.
Now, do you think that that relationship with law enforcement, it's a two-way street? Yes, the civilians need to show respect for the police officers, but so do the police officers need to show that respect for the person that they engage with.
That's exactly my point.
Yeah, because that encounter, like you said, can define how you see law enforcement.
Exactly.
We all understand that they have a tough job.
Very hard job.
A very hard job, very stressing. But the respect that they demand should be the respect that they give.
It's a two-way street. But that being said, they have a very hard job. There is a tendency to paint them with a very broad brush. I've made it my business to be very, very supportive of law enforcement in Yonkers.
So am I.
And I believe that is the right thing to do. I hold them in, recently, 2 officers came to my house in Yonkers. They were investigating a crime around the corner. They didn't know me, they didn't know who I was, and they shouldn't. But they were so professional, so appropriate, asked the right questions, took notes, did everything you would ask. And I called Commissioner Mueller, and I think I called the captain of the 1st Precinct afterwards to say, credit to you, because there are so many positive relationships with law enforcement, and these young men and women who do have a very tough and dangerous job need to be commended. And so I think it's important that we publicly stand up with them. I try to go to their promotions, support them, and know that that doesn't mean we can't criticize and disagree about criminal justice things. There is a way to have a good relationship, and I'm very proud that I've tried hard to have one.
Now, how you feel about coffee with a cop, pizza with a cop, stop and shake, all these programs? To me, they are great because they're building a relationship. They connect in that bridge.
Well, they also, over time, and credit to all of them and the citizen activists who pushed this. These came from the ground up, not always from the police.
Correct.
And that being said, they took some police out of their comfort zone, like you have to sit with somebody regular like me or you, and they also encouraged a breakdown of the barriers of race. Race is out there. It's an issue in our society.
Accepting it or not, it's still alive and kicking, Senator.
It's alive and kicking, and it's been a challenge. Yonkers has done an excellent job in trying to break down those barriers, but those kinds of things, I'm a big believer in eating with people that you disagree with, because that is a way. Coffee, pizza,
You change that atmosphere.
Exactly. That's why we have family celebrations. You think everyone at our Thanksgiving or holiday agrees? No. But you have, your glass of wine, you eat together, and that is a social interaction. And I think we could do better with that in society as a whole.
Senator, we don't have much time, and I know that you have other events to go after. So, in closure, to close this interview, tell us, what do you think is the most important thing in our city, county, and state that needs to be addressed? According to you, what's the priority?
Well, my priority is education, because I believe quality public schools are the path for people to achieve the American dream. I mean, you can have very little, and if you have supportive teachers, a safe environment, a challenging academic environment that believes in you as a student and holds high expectations of students and their families, it is a way to move up and beyond to achieve your own dreams. I'm a true believer in that. That is the American success story. Public schools, the right of every child to go to public school, is a fantastic thing that is very American. And so we have to fight for the money to make every school as good as it should be. It includes sports, arts, music, guidance counselors, all the things our kids need. That's my challenge, to fight for that. It's not going to be over at the end of the budget. It's a lifelong fight.
So education is actually the key for success.
I believe for our next generation.
For next generation. Senator, last question. How do you feel about charter schools?
Well, I have had a fantastic relationship with the charter school in Yonkers. And they've done an excellent job. That being said, people should understand, when charter schools expand, the money comes directly out of the money we are fighting for the Yonkers public schools. So every child that attends a charter school, a certain amount of money is taken from the pot that we give to the Yonkers public schools. Now, the Yonkers public schools don't have less building expenses, heat expenses, teacher expenses, just because a child moves there. And also, I happen to think that charter schools, as publicly funded schools, should be held to the same levels of accountability and transparency. That being said, I respect that parents want to choose. And if they believe that it's a better choice for their child, that is a legitimate point, and I'm not standing in the way of that. But our primary focus has to be funding our traditional public schools well enough to educate every child.
On that note, we conclude. Senator, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
For taking the time.
Very nice.
This is our very first meeting.
No.
We had another one before?
Yes, we did. In a restaurant.
Oh, but that don't count. A one-on-one.
No, it was a one-on-one.
Was one-on-one?
Yes.
Well, guys, it's the second one. No, I appreciate you taking the time
My
off
pleasure.
your busy
Thank
schedule. Our interest is just to inform the people of Yonkers. As
Thank
I
you.
always say, we don't endorse,
Yeah.
we don't oppose. Our interest is to educate, inform, and let people know from the people involved, from our elected officials, what is going on. Now it's up to you guys to reach a conclusion.
But I would also say, this is not about politics. This is about governing.
Okay.
Whether people voted for me or not, my obligation is to represent every person. And I share Yonkers with the majority leader. It's a small part of my district, but it's my home. I have great loyalty to it. And it will always be, very much top of mind.
Senator, things are changing quickly, very quickly in society. How important do you think it's social media in the sense of giving the people the information?
Huge. It's a game changer.
It's a game changer.
Yes.
Things are not the same as they used to be 20 years ago.
I know that. Thank you, Ru.
Thank you. Until next time.